Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Above the Brim, where the media minds think beyond the brim. Whew. You know my name. I'm Bucket Hat Pat, and today we're joined by the very important producer of the new short action film Catastrophe, Hubert Salgado.
Uh, Thank you for introducing me, Mr. Bucket Hat Pat. I'm happy to be here. I've always watched this podcast. I always want to be here. So we're gonna be talking about Catastrophe. You have any questions?
Man, let's get straight to the questions. You know what I mean?
All
So,
right.
to start off, let me ask you a big question. Start. How does your film use or challenge the typical action genre conventions, and how does it like represent social groups or issues?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So it follows genre conventions in a similar way to the typical tropes of action films. Typically, superficially, you see high energy. You see people fighting consistently, improvised fighting. But the main, I guess, key to catastrophe is its ambiguity of the case. The MacGuffin is the proper term for it, where you have an item that essentially surrounds a plot. However, where the film begins to challenge conventions is throughout its characters, particularly the protagonist. Traditionally, action films
Mm,
typically traditionally action films present protagonists as highly capable, almost invincible individuals who persevere regardless of the odds. But where catastrophe is different, my protagonist is not portrayed as an unstoppable or infallible. Instead, he presents desperation. He's essentially a fleeting hope in an overwhelming situation where someone who is clearly outmatched and realistically doomed to fail. Rather than being a dominant force, he is more like a final resistance against an inevitable defeat. Even so, what defines him isn't victory, but persistence. Before reaching the end of his life, he is driven by one final purpose, and that's to help his family, the main goal for the entire movie. This adds emotional depth, and it shifts the triumph to sacrifice. On the other side, the antagonist, the mob boss, fits the organized crime trope, but with a twist. Typically, crime bosses are portrayed as calm, calculated, and almost emotionless, so pretty much stoic. But in Catastrophe, however, the mob boss is more volatile, while still portraying a powerful and imposing persona. He carries a sense of visible frustration and scorn, suggesting personal conflict tied to the protagonist. This makes him feel less like a distant figure of authority and more like an active, emotionally driven threat. In terms of representation, the film primarily explores themes of domination versus desperation. The characters reflect a harsh reality where power dictates survival. The protagonist is essentially like a single individual trying to fight against a system far greater than himself, almost like a sheep confronting a pack of wolves. The film also reflects broader themes such as death, urgency, and the human instinct to survive under pressure. While it does lean towards a male dominated environment, which is common in organized crime narratives, it doesn't exclude any audience. Instead, it reflects the specific world the set is set in, or the story is set in. Additionally, the mystery of the briefcase, like I said before, the ambiguity, plays a symbolic role, similar to films like No Country for Old Men. The object itself derives the narrative, even though its content remains unknown. This emphasizes how people are willing to risk everything for something they perceive as valuable, even without fully understanding.
a really interesting contrast between power and desperation, use of your genres. Like you also like mentioned inspiration. You mentioned like all these movie tropes. Like, is there like something specific, any films or any like specific like influences that like shaped your approach or what you were trying to get at or who you're trying to make your film seem as?
Oh, for sure, 100%, definitely. The organized crime aspect of the film draws clear inspiration from movies like Goodfellas, where you see the structured hierarchies, calculated operations, and sense of control within criminal organizations that influences that is reflected through costuming, behavior, and the overall presence of the mob boss. And at the same time, the combat and action elements are influenced by films like John Wick. But instead of fully embracing that level of skill and dominance, me and my team, Aiden, Daniel Barreto, and Adrian, intentionally or contrasted purposely, was that in this action film, the protagonist would match not his not the typical abilities of a protagonist. In Catastrophe, the protagonist lacks the level of control, which reinforces the idea of desperation rather than dominance. So while the film clearly takes inspiration from these established works, it also reshapes those ideas to create something more grounded and essentially a tragic ending towards what would normally be a heroic, triumphant success.
I could definitely tell you guys, using inspiration from John Wick's, this type of action movie. They're all fast paced, whatnot. And some not to spoil, but some John Wick movies don't always have good happy endings, man. But anyways, let's move on to audience engagement, retention, whatever you want to call it. How would you say your film capture somebody like myself's attention, or how do you keep somebody like me or the audience to sit down and just continue watching your film while you gobbling on some popcorn?
Oh, of course. It's designed in a world where short form content is constantly surrounding the audience, quick dopamine. It's made to keep the audience engaged with fast action. So the beginning of the movie starts off with a suspenseful sound, an argument in the background with building music. And before the viewer has time to really observe and perceive what's happening, it completely cuts into straight action. So this immediate immersion is crucial because it prevents any slow buildup that might lose the audience's attention. From that point forward, the pacing remains consistently fast. There are rapid transitions and tense sequences. There's very little downtime, which keeps the energy high throughout the film. One of the most important engagement tools is the ambiguity and mystery surrounding the briefcase. Both the protagonist and the antagonist are desperate to obtain it, but the audience is never told exactly what it contains. This unanswered question drives curiosity and engages viewers to essentially stay and be curious and want to inquire what's inside of the briefcase. There's also a strong visual and auditory intensity. The combination of abrupt cuts, dynamic movement, and intense music creates a sense of chaos that makes the film feel immersive. Viewers aren't just watching the action, they're experiencing it. In the term of audience appeal, I believe the film would resonate strongly with a younger demographic, particularly teenage viewers, because of the cool factor. The fast action, the intensity, and the immersive experience that makes them feel like an action hero fighting criminals. It can also appeal to an older audience who may feel a sense of nostalgia, as it reflects themes and styles seen in classic crime films like The Godfather and Scarface. So overall, the film engages through intensity, mystery, and emotional stakes.
Of course, everybody wants to wonder, what's inside that briefcase. Everybody wants to just dig in, just sit down, watch the movie. Like as time goes on, you're so entertained, you don't know like time like flies by. You know what I mean? But now moving on to another question I've been dying to ask you. If this were a real media product, how would you approach like real production, distribution of your film, and most importantly, marketing? Because you need marketing to put your film out there.
Oh, of course, of course. So, from a production standpoint, the focus would be on efficiency and coordination. Action film require a precise timing that's kind of hard to get down, but especially during the fight scenes and chase sequences. So, having a reliable and well organized crew would be essential to setting up those fundamental scenes that every action movie needs. For distribution, I would initially release the film on platforms like YouTube to build an audience, and gain visibility. From there, I would submit trailers to film festivals. That would be a strong next step to increase credibility and exposure. If expanded further, it could potentially be distributed through streaming platforms and support independent films. So maybe Hulu, Paramount Plus, etc., etc.
Definitely.
Marketing would also be a huge role. I would focus on creating strong trailers that highlight the most intense moments, along with posters that emphasize mystery and conflict. Catastrophe, leave the MacGuffin ambiguous.
Wordplay.
Conflict, especially signifying the briefcase. So social media would be key, using short clips and promotional content to build anticipation. So pretty much to summarize, the goal would be to create a clear identity for the film, and something that immediately communicates action, intensity, and suspense.
Of course, like, with that whole glow of marketing, when you're on the street and you see something so intense, like everybody just wants to dive in. They want a deeper look to see like what this film's really about because it's an interesting name, interesting film. So, but anyways, let's talk about your personal development as a filmmaker. How would you, Hubert Salgado, how would you personally say that your skills have evolved, gotten better, like during this project? Like,
So,
what career might you also want? What career might you never want anymore?
okay. So, personally, I believe my development as a filmmaker grew significantly throughout this process, especially in terms of camera work. I came to understand that filming isn't just about recording, it's about applying knowledge of camera angles, movements, and composition effectively. To improve, what I did was I practiced outside of filming days by capturing images of moving subjects in nature like birds or insects, and this helped me develop the precision and timing I needed to really capture the essence of the film and make it feel immersive. I also experimented with camera angles, such as low angles, high angles, high angles to create a dominance, and low angles to create a vulnerable effect, which we integrated and implemented throughout scenes of the movie. Additionally, I worked on improving camera movements, including pans and whip pans, to make the scenes feel more fluid and dynamic. This definitely is the area where my confidence grew the most. On the sound aspect, this was more challenging. Filming in an environment with uncontrollable noise like air conditioning units, it made capturing clean audio difficult, while recording in quieter spaces was easier. So learning how to mix audio properly required persistence and adaptation to new software. Lighting was most intuitively the easiest. It was filmed at night, so the low key, background and the low key foreground was always there. So we didn't really need to work on this much. Personally, I feel like my lighting skills remain rather stagnant. And editing is probably the area I grew the least. I had little prior experience going into it and relied on my collaboration with my teammate Aiden. Um, while he still took my input, um, he essentially showed me the ropes and how to edit simple things like a syncing audio with film. And for the most part, I just regurgitated my opinions, and he essentially changed the film how I mentioned.
Well, how would you say so? Like, what's like a job that you might want to pursue? Like, based off what you told me, I think you can do some real nice camera work, man.
Yeah, that is the idea, pretty much. Maybe create a camera business where I create and distribute cameras. Maybe ones that have you know, moving portions. So if I want to do a
Yeah,
whip pan, I can click a button, the camera rotates. Just ideas like that.
and like, what's career you might never want? Like, what's a career you might not want after working so long in this industry, like seeing all these different like areas.
100% anything related to editing. Um, I despise the process. It was tedious and requires a lot of tenacity, but it's for sure a good career for people who want to explore
Yes.
options with editing and reviewing footage.
Yeah, tell me about it. I gotta pay my editors a bunch, man.
Yeah.
But moving on. Last question. How do you use technology in your project? How do you integrate it?
So, technology played a crucial role, especially given our limitations in budget and time. We use modern smartphones, especially the newer iPhone models, which allowed us to record in 4K resolution at around 30 frames per second. Sorry about the coughing, by the way. These gave us about a week's time to work with the product that we had at hand, but it gave us high quality footage and without needing expensive equipment. For certain shots, we did have to be creative, innovative with what we had. So, for an example of this, was a smooth hallway shot at the very beginning of the film. And the way we achieved this was putting my friend Aiden on a car, not on a car, but on a cart, and slowly push him down while he had his hands planted above, kind of recording the screen, or not screen, but the hallway, and just slowly pushing him forward. Lighting also required improvisation. In one scene, we use a mechanic style lighting rod positioned behind the subject to create a strong silhouette effect. This not only solved the lighting issue, but also enhanced the visual impact of the scene. It was essentially too dark, so we positioned Adrian about 30 feet behind Daniel Barreto as he was walking in through the door with the mechanical rod holding it up, and it illuminated the entire scene. But overall, the use of accessible technology combined with creative problem solving allowed us to produce a film that feels much more professional than the resource might suggest.
Yeah, man, like all these, lighting technology, they definitely help boost, a film out. But apart from that, man, I'm calling this episode a wrap. Thank you so much for coming into the show, Mr. Salgado. Thank you so much for giving us your insightful, information.
Of course, thank you for everything, and we'll have a good one.